Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Carol Stewart. Carol, welcome.
Hi, Mindy. Thank you for having me here on your show.
I'm delighted. You and I are going to have a nice chat about thoughtful leadership. But before we do that, why don't you tell everybody what you're up to in the world, what you're doing?
Right. Okay. So I am an executive and career coach. I'm known as the coach for High Achieving Introverted Women. I specialize in coaching women who are senior leaders to be visible, to exude presence, to influence and make an impact. And I also work with organizations, providing training, workshops, webinars on career development, leadership development, and personal development as well. And I'm the author of the book, Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman, which was listed as one of the 10 best self-development books written by women to read during lockdown.
That is very exciting. I saw that, and maybe some of our listeners and viewers noticed that as well. Quietly visible or invisible?
Visible.
Visible. Yeah, many people are quietly invisible, but that's kind of no point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, quietly visible. Brilliant. So you said something about senior women, did you?
Yes.
So they've made it already, right? They've already sort of climbed up the ladder. So why do they need help?
Because even though they've had great success in their careers, they still struggle with sort of some of the internal problems that go with it, such as self-doubt, imposter syndrome. And they, even though they may be successful, have had great careers, that puts a lot of pressure on them, and it's stressful as well. And it also affects their ability to be themselves and show up as they would like to as well, and also to be as influential and impactful as they would like.
Yeah. Well, you're right about that. You know, I write about this all the time, about the fact that when you're climbing up that ladder, the more successful or the more senior you become, there are more eyes on you. There's just the spotlight is on you. And that does add pressure. I mean, even running my own business, and I know you work with entrepreneurial women as well, when you're building your profile, it's fun, but it also has that element of, oh my gosh, there are a lot of people looking at me.
And that is right. That's it. And then the thing is, the more senior you get and the more responsibility you have, the more eyes that are on you.
I know. So you don't seem to have a problem with this. We love your confidence. So what are your tricks and tips? How do you keep yourself upbeat and confident and, happy to be in the limelight?
I mean, I do experience it myself, but I've learned how to manage it. I've learned how to manage those negative voices that sort of say, oh, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? That sort of thing. I've learned how to manage that and not let that stop me from moving forward. I may have moments where, particularly if it's something that I'm not familiar with, or if I'm taking on a new and bigger challenge, where the imposter syndrome might try to rear its head and say, who do you think you are? But I quickly shut it down.
So how do you shut it down? Our viewers and listeners want to hear your best tips.
So having that awareness, and to me, self-awareness is key. And having that awareness, so those things that are likely to trigger that self-doubt or that imposter syndrome, and looking at what your thoughts and beliefs are about yourself and the situation that you're in, because they're very much led by our emotions. And many of us act and behave according to how we're feeling. And often that's because of our belief about ourselves or what it is that we've got to do. And often that belief can be an unhelpful belief. It could be an irrational belief. It may not be no evidence to support what we're believing, but because we think it and believe it, sometimes we don't give enough thought to what we're thinking about. And so when you're in a situation and you're feeling anxious, just about something that you need to do, just pause and think to yourself, okay, what's going on for me here? What are my thoughts and what am I thinking about this and what are my beliefs about it? And challenge them and change them to something which is more helpful. Because if you can change how you think, you'll change how you feel. And if you change how you feel, you change how you act and behave.
Yeah, brilliant advice from a brilliant coach. And people can't always have the coach there with them 24/7. So would you say people really nowadays have to coach themselves? And there are a lot of resources out there, including your work and many books, and people are coaching themselves nowadays, right?
Yes. And I think if people do the work and develop themselves and have the knowledge and the tools, I call it a toolkit, the things that they can take out when they're in those moments where the panic sets in or the doubt sets in, so they know what they can do to manage that situation so that they still go ahead. And the thing is that even though you may be feeling doubtful and worrying about it inside, nobody knows that unless you let them see that.
Yeah, you're right about that. I have stopped taking notes with me, holding notes when I'm speaking, because even me being a speaker and trainer for 33 years, my hands will still shake. And I just say to myself, well, it's excitement. That's fine. But when you notes that doesn't give a lot of confidence to the audience. So I just don't use any notes. That's one of the things that
And sometimes I think having notes can be even worse, because then you're trying to read your notes whilst you're trying to speak. And then you may think, oh, I've missed a line. And then you start to get back and it can end up being worse than if you haven't got your notes. So, and even if you maybe miss a line of what you want to say, as you're talking, you may remember, and you can sort of add it in and people won't notice. So when I did my TEDx talk last year, and with a TEDx talk, you have to know your words word for word, because you have to submit your speech beforehand. And so you have to learn it word for word. And as I was speaking, I said something, and then I realized I'd missed part of what I'd wanted to say. And in that moment, I felt a little panic arise. But then I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not going to listen to that. I just put that down and I just carried on. And then the thing is, nobody even noticed.
No, of course not. Thank you for sharing that and that vulnerability. When I did my TEDx talk, I didn't intend to learn it word for word. I didn't need to submit, the full script or anything like that. So they all work slightly differently.
Yeah.
But I practiced it so much, I pretty much had it word for word. And I knew that I got 2 words wrong, and they're not wrong. And as you say, the audience doesn't know.
Yeah, that's right.
If I were to focus on that, you would have seen my eyes going all over the place, and it would have shown up in my face. Luckily, it was towards the end. Anyway, I look back and I just think, how silly is that to focus on 2 words out of I don't know how many thousands.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's how it was for me. If I'd have focused on that, then the panic would have shown, and then I would have probably started stumbling. But instead, and that is, a great tip for people who are speaking, is if you start whilst you're doing your talk, and then you get at that moment where you start to doubt yourself, just park that thought and tell yourself, I haven't got time to worry about this now. I'll worry about it later. Right now, I'm focused on delivering what I'm delivering.
Yes. Very, very good advice. So we can tell you're very passionate about this and you really want to help women. What would you say you're most passionate about in life, Carol?
I would say for me, I'm most passionate about social justice and seeing that everybody has equal access to opportunities, that social justice for everybody. And that is probably the thing. But at the core of what I do, it's about social justice.
Tell us a bit more about that, if you will.
Okay, so, I think we live in a very unequal, unfair world. And, there's so many elements and so much strands to it, and I can't sort of focus on everything. So I focus on women because women are so disadvantaged across the world. And I believe that if all women had the self-belief to go after what it was that they want, that they would become spheres of influence in their respective fields, in their communities, in their families, whether they're a stay-at-home mum, whether they've got their own business, whether they're working for somebody, they would become spheres of influence that would bring about positive change, and that would result in social justice for all.
Well, that sounds great, because that's in line with the thoughtful leader methodology.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of opportunities around, and what we've noticed through our work is the opportunities are there more than people think, but when they're opened up, for example, and I think a lot of our listeners will relate to this, we get up in arms when we see a conference that has all middle-aged white men speaking, and we're aiming to make that awareness at least to the people who are organizing the event. And then they open it up, and they're not allowed to say, we want women. But I've had conference organizers tell me that very few women applied. So we, as women, really need to do more for ourselves. And I think you're right, Carol. It comes with the confidence and the belief, because and that doesn't exist, for many women for many reasons, which we don't have time to go into, but we need to. Or maybe we need to do what you're talking about and put ourselves forward, even if we're not 100% confident. What do you think?
Yes, and I do think so, because unless, yes, we want change, but we've also got to be the change as well. We also have to do what we need to do in order to make change and influence change as well. And yes, you may not have the confidence, or you may not have the knowledge, but then identify what it is. So often I see women who will write themselves off as lacking confidence, but it's not necessarily that they lack confidence. It might be that when they break it down, that there may be something that they haven't got experience in, or something that they need training in. And once they develop whatever it is, then they're okay. But just to blanket it, put a blanket over it and say, I lack the confidence, is not always an accurate reflection.
Yeah, well, nobody else is going to do it for you. So ladies, if you're listening, I think there's a couple of messages here. Carol and I work in this sphere of aiming to provide more equity, more opportunities. And yet you need to step up and take them, ladies. And gentlemen, or any gender, seriously, who doesn't identify with ladies. If you are organizing an event, or there's any opportunity, or you're looking for people to write books, white papers, anything, if there's a project, maybe you need to make an extra effort to pull people in who are, quietly a little bit underconfident, maybe the more introverted or the less confident women, not just women, but we're talking about women.
And the other thing as well is, look at how they're advertising for speakers as well. Are they reaching women with their adverts or their promotions? And are they speaking in a way that makes women feel that they are included?
Oh, you mean the words they're using or the platforms? What do you mean?
Yes, a bit of both. So, how are they going about asking for speakers? And if they're finding that women aren't applying to speak, then what sort of research are they doing to look at why women aren't applying to speak?
Right. Well, this is great. You and I are definitely going to continue the conversation. In my publishing company, Panoma Press, we've been making a big effort to include people from traditionally underrepresented groups, shall we call them. So that means women, but also people of color, disabled people or differently abled people, people from the LGBTQ plus community, and anyone else who feels that left to chance, they're not given a fair chance. I don't like leaving things to chance anyway. That's not in my DNA or yours. No. What would you say to an organization who thinks, yes, I actually want to provide equity, which means over prioritizing some groups until there's a level playing field? How can they word that? Because you've now hit my hot button about advertising opportunities. And I'll just explain. I find it really hard to say to people, we're specifically looking for authors from these groups, because it feels a bit PC and it feels a bit, I don't know, am I allowed to say that? Like reverse or positive discrimination? What are your thoughts?
I think where there is an underrepresentation, then yes. I remember not long after I started my business, and I started a networking event in central London for women. And I remember, and I sort of posted about it on LinkedIn, I got some men saying, oh, how comes it's just the women? What about the men? Men, want support too, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, because women are underrepresented, and also the Equalities Act allows for where there is an underrepresentation of a particular group, that you can have things like that. So, I know you're a global organization, but I know in the UK and possibly in the US that they have legislation that allows for this as well.
Right. I'm always careful with my words. As a thoughtful leader or aspiring thoughtful leader, I always want to show respect, and I always want to have a considered approach. So this is an ongoing conversation here in the business, and I always try to get other views. And you know what? We'll try things, and it's happened that we've had the haters and the trolls come out and say things. But my passion is such, and I know yours is too, Carol, that until we do have that level playing field, my work is not done. Your work is not done. So that's what we're talking about here. We're not being politically correct or incorrect or anything like that. In fact, it's a positive thing that you're doing. Would you agree?
And that's right. Yes. I mean, I wish it wasn't the case, because then, there would be no need for what I do, or I would be working in a different way. But and that is why my focus is women, because of the underrepresentation at senior levels of women. And that is why I focus on women. It's not to the exclusion of men, because I do work with men as well. But that is how I focus is, looking at what I can do to sort of bring women up to the same level.
Right. Until there's a level playing field. That's my key phrase. Cool. Tell us about a particular challenge that you've had in your life or business, something that really made you stop in your tracks and, think, be thoughtful.
Yeah. So I'd say it was in the early days of my business, I was working with, even though my focus was women, but I was working with all women. And I found that I wasn't getting the traction that I wanted. And I was working with women who were sort of in employment, who were sort of senior leaders, women who were sort of just starting their leadership journey, women who wanted to change career, women who wanted to leave employment, start their own business, women who were already in business. And I just thought, I'm not getting the traction. And I recognized it was because I'm having to dilute my messaging, because I'm trying to speak to such a wide group that I'm not really sort of hitting the mark, so to speak, with my message. And so then I made a decision to narrow down my focus. And that was a bit of a challenge at first, because I thought, am I going too narrow? And I'm aware that a lot of people sort of get this. Am I going too narrow? Will that then mean I won't get any work at all? So it took me a while. But even though I knew that, it made sense logically, emotionally, I hadn't kind of made that connection. It was a good while before I actually made the decision. And even when I chose to focus on introversion as well, it took me a while. So I thought, I'm going to be limiting myself then. And it took me a while, even though I knew it made sense logically, emotionally, I hadn't made that connection. But then when I did, I saw a big difference.
Sure. Well, I think we all would appreciate the fact that there are millions of introverted women around the world, even introverted senior women and people who are being quietly invisible, who need your help. So you've narrowed it down, but there's still a huge market, there's still a huge need. And I guess until it's resolved, your work is not done.
Yeah, and that is what I found. So I started writing articles about the challenges that introverted women leaders face. Probably think it was about 2016. And I started getting inundated with messages, emails, comments on my articles. And the more I talked about it, the more people came towards me. And that's then resulted in me thinking, and the reason why I got to that point was because I was reflecting on who I'd worked with in my business. And I recognized that the majority of them were introverted. And I thought, that's interesting, because I'm introverted myself. And that's when I started writing the articles about the challenges. And because I was bombarded with messages, comments, emails, I decided to make that my area of focus. And that's why I decided to write the book. That book wasn't my initial book that I was going to write. I was going to write a book for women who were leaving corporate to start their own business, and particularly focusing on the mindset challenges that go with that. And I'd interviewed 12 women who had successfully done that transition and had successful businesses. I'd had the interviews transcribed and I'd actually started to write it. And then that was when, at the time that I started writing these articles about introversion, and I recognised, I thought there's a greater need for this because there's just so many that are affected by this. And that's how that came about. And then it was 2019, towards the end of 2019, LinkedIn invited me to write a regular newsletter on the platform, in which I started, and I called it Quietly Visible, like my book, for introverted women who were leaders. And in that space of time of just over a year, it's grown to about 68,000 subscribers. So that just highlights the extent of the situation.
Yes. And that, I'm sure, is just scratching the surface. There are so many more people who don't even know about it. So well done on all your success. I wish we had hours and hours to talk about some of the other things you're doing, but that's okay, because our viewers and listeners can find you on LinkedIn for sure. Yeah. And is that your preferred place to meet up with people?
It is. Yes, it is.
Yeah. I think it's a solid platform that isn't going anywhere. So find Carol Stewart on LinkedIn, and she will be more than happy to engage with you in one way or another. Yes. For now, I just have to thank you so much for a really enlightening conversation. We're all doing great work in the world, you, me, our listeners. And we just need to keep spreading the positivity and just keep working until our work is done. So thank you, Carol.
Thank you for having me, Mindy. It's been a pleasure. Right.
Take care and see you soon. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.